originally, our mandate was to support the surviving Hong Kong veterans, because when the Hong Kong veterans came home from the Second World War, their health was very poor, and not only the Canadian government, but the people of Canada didn't believe the stories that they were telling them with regards to their experiences as prisoners of war of the Japanese, and the slave labor camps, the disease, the torture. As the Hong Kong veterans grew older and became less in numbers and their strength was failing, in 1996, a group of sons and daughters of the Hong Kong veterans formed an association called the Hong Kong Veterans Commemorative Association. And our goals were to support the surviving Hong Kong veterans and their widows, and to educate Canadians with regards to the story of C-Force. And C-Force is specifically the Canadians that were sent to reinforce the British Empire in Hong Kong in lieu of a possible Japanese attack. I don't relish whatsoever in the misery and the suffering and the innocent lives that those bombs cost. But those bombs also ended the Second World War. An interesting conversation with the granddaughter of an elderly Chinese lady who lived in a small village in 1939, and I don't remember the name of the village in China. When the Japanese came through that village, and they were working in the rice fields, and they brought the workers out and they had them on this area. It was kind of a sandy area, and they started beheading them for no reason whatsoever. And this one Chinese lady, the grandmother of this girl I was talking to, she was the only survivor of that. And the reason she survived is that, and I don't remember the reason why, but she knew the name of the Japanese emperor, and she knew how to write the name somewhat. So she wrote it in the sand. When they came to her, they left her and they kept going. And she survived that beheading in that village, only because she was able to maybe misspell, but to let them know that she was aware of who the Japanese emperor was. So in my view, that says an awful lot about the mentality of the Japanese forces of those days. Now, I think we all agree that the people of Japan, and the people of Japan were probably far different too than the imperial forces of Japan. But the imperial forces of Japan were the exact opposite of the term we use today quite often, which is humanitarian. There was no mercy and there was no pity, and it's not a secret whatsoever that the Japanese forces, with regards to the prisoners of war of the Allied forces who were on Japanese soil, that if there were to be an invasion of Japan, that all prisoners of war to be executed immediately. The A-bomb precluded, obviously, that happening. So it was just so sudden, and history shows that basically the Japanese, who were the authoritative state in these prisoners of war camps, they just evaporated and left. They just vanished. So I'm not a man of violence. I don't like violence. Having said that, I would stand up for my country if called upon, if need be. But none of our Hong Kong veterans would have come home if it wasn't for the A-bomb.